You know John Lennon. Lennon said, I'm an artist. You give me a fucking tuber, I'll get you something out of it. For instance, I look at you and I think, what could I use you for?
Here are the ingredients for this week's recipe. 500 grams of fresh mushrooms. A blend of wild and domestic is fine, all wild is fine, all domestic is fine, no matter. I cooked this recipe once using all chanterelles and once using all cremini, and they were different, but both super delicious. I would suggest using a variety of mushrooms in the same soup if you can, which will add to the overall complexity of the dish. 50 grams of dried mushrooms. 1 liter of chicken broth. This is a homemade version made from chicken carcasses that I roasted in the oven until brown and then pressure cooked in the Instant Pot with a couple of tablespoons of miso paste. 75 to 100 grams of butter, depending on how loosey-goosey you're feeling. Did you know that many of the flavor compounds in chanterelles are fat-soluble? So the butter is there to add flavor, but also to release flavors that are already there, waiting for you to add butter. 1 tablespoon of salt, or to taste. So that's 5 ingredients. Anyways, I know what you're thinking. Shut up about the stupid butter. I don't live in the Pacific Northwest and I'm broke as fuck. Chanterelles are like $25 a pound at the farmer's market, but I still want to make mushroom soup. I got you. I went to the grocery store and I spent $7 on a bag of mushrooms and a box of regular old Knorr chicken broth, and I cooked this recipe using those ingredients and it still came out good. So give this a try with whatever you're able to get your hands on. While you prep the fresh mushrooms, boil some water. Stuff the dried mushrooms into a jar and pour enough boiling water over them to cover them by half. Then use a spoon to smush them down until they're all submerged. Don't use too much water. As they reconstitute, the dried mushrooms will absorb some, but we're only after about a cup of soaking liquid after, so you want that liquid to be as concentrated with flavor as possible. Chop the mushrooms into smallish pieces. You don't have to be a surgeon here with your cuts because we're going to blend the soup at the end anyways. You just want to chop things up a bit to increase the surface area for the browning stage. Get a cast iron pan and let it heat up on the stove. Don't add any oil or butter or anything at this stage. Just use a dry cast iron or non-stick pan. Don't crowd the mushrooms, which means don't throw the whole 500 grams into the pan all at once. You're going to do this in a few batches. See how the moisture's steaming off the mushrooms here? Also, do you hear this whistle sound as I move them around in the pan? That's what you want. Keep moving them around so they get brown, but don't burn, although a couple of burn spots is okay. You're looking to add a toasty, caramelized depth of flavor during this stage. When things are smelling nutty and toasty but not burned, take them out and set them aside in a bowl while you continue to brown the rest of the mushrooms because you're doing them in batches and not crowding them in the pan. If you crowd the mushrooms, terrible things will happen to you. Okay, congratulate yourself. The hardest part of the recipe is done. Get your stock pot and throw in as much butter as you have courage. Once the butter is looking nice and toasty, you may or may not want to just make brown butter here or like melt it and then add the mushrooms. It's your choice. Then add the dry fried mushrooms in, which will absorb some of the butter. Strain the now reconstituted dried mushrooms, reserving the liquid, and add them to the pot. Cook at medium-high, stirring occasionally to let the butter and the shrooms get to know each other, and then add the broth and the mushroom liquid to the party. Let things come to a boil and lower to a simmer. Simmer for about 10 minutes and then turn the stove off and let the soup cool down just a little bit before ladling it into your blender and blending it until it reaches the consistency that you desire. You want a little bit of texture in your soup? Don't go as long. Want it super smooth and unctuous? Go for a long time. Then pass the soup through a chinois if you're feeling really insane. I did not do this, but I might if I was having like a really fancy dinner party where I wanted things to be really refined. It's your choice. After the soup is blended, rinse out your pot and add the soup back in. Taste it. At this point, add salt. I went with about a tablespoon or so. So, there you go. Creamy mushroom soup with no cream, but with lots of butter. A warming, earthy, savory way to enjoy seasonal mushrooms in the fall. Enjoy.